gates froze first. I heard the cracking of iron yielding to the ice, that sound like breaking bone. And then, when the doors of Silvercrest exploded into 1,000 shards of crystal, I walked through. The banquet halted, goblets suspended in the air, mouths agape, eyes wide. I could feel the heat of that hall surrendering to the cold I carried with me, the snow sweeping in like a silent horde, covering the abundant food while my people starved outside. And there he was, Eldrick, my former mate, the man who tore our bond apart in front of the entire pack, who called me dead weight, who sent me to my death with nothing but a tattered shawl. The goblet slipped from his fingers and shattered on the floor. Red from the wine. Red like the blood I spilled alone in that snow. Red like the mark Oberon placed on my children's foreheads to save them. My children. My twins. Zephyr walked on my right, 5 years old and strong enough to break a man in half. Alawan floated on my left, her white eyes seeing through the souls of everyone there. And behind me, the shadow that eclipsed the sun itself, Oberon, the Lycan King. My mate. Eldrick opened his mouth. His voice came out strangled. Vespera, you died. I smiled. The first genuine smile in 5 years. The cold preserves Eldrick. I took a step forward and he backed away. Zuleika was right. In that moment, looking at the terror in the eyes of the man who destroyed me, I knew it had all been worth it. Every scar, every frozen tear, every night I thought I wouldn't survive. But you don't know how I got there yet, do you? If this story has already touched something in you, stick with me. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel. Tell me in the comments, where are you listening to me from right now? This story is mine, but from now on, it's yours too. So let me take you back to the beginning, to the day they took everything from me, except the only thing that mattered. The infirmary smelled of bitter herbs and lies. I was lying on that cold wooden table, my eyes fixed on the ceiling rafters, counting the knots in the wood so I wouldn't think about what was happening. 17 knots. 18. The healer pressed on my belly with rough hands, muttering words I couldn't understand. Next to me, in a chair she shouldn't have occupied, Zuleika watched everything with that serpent smile she thought no one noticed. I noticed. I noticed how she leaned too close to the table of vials, how her fingers danced among the colored glass while she pretended to adjust her own jewels, how she swapped a blue vial for another, identical one, in a movement so fluid it looked natural. My heart pounded. I wanted to scream. I wanted to point. I wanted to tear that mask of innocence from her face. But who would believe me? Zuleika was the favorite. The Alpha's mistress everyone pretended not to see. The woman Eldrick looked at as he never looked at me, not even on the night of our mating. The healer picked up the swapped vial. He poured 3 drops into a silver container. He waited. The liquid remained clear. I knew what that meant. Everyone knew. When a she-wolf carried life, the liquid turned golden. It had been this way since ancient times. It was how the matriarchs confirmed their blessings. But I felt it. By the moon goddess. I felt it. Something was growing inside me. Something that made my breasts ache and my stomach turn every morning. I knew my body better than any vial could show. Her womb is barren. The healer's voice echoed like a death sentence. She will never bear Alpha Eldrick an heir. Zuleika sighed dramatically. What a tragedy. Poor girl. I wanted to vomit. Not from nausea, but from rage. From helplessness. From watching that woman destroy my life with 3 drops of poison and a pitying smile. They took me to the throne room as if I were a criminal. The guards held my arms with unnecessary force, their fingers digging into my skin. The corridor to the hall had never seemed so long. Every step echoed on the stone walls, every echo repeating my sentence. Baron, Baron, Baron. The hall was full, not with support, not with compassion, but with morbid curiosity. Pack members crowded in the corners, whispering behind their hands, their eyes gleaming with that hunger people feel when they are about to witness someone's downfall. Yesterday they bowed before me. Today I was the entertainment. Eldrick was on the throne. My mate, my Alpha, the man who promised to protect me before the full moon, who marked my neck with his teeth, who swore our bond was eternal. He didn't look sad. He didn't look devastated by the news that his Luna couldn't give him heirs. No. Eldrick looked irritated, as if I were an annoyance, a stain on his shirt that he finally had an excuse to toss away. Zuleika slid to his side. occupying the space that should have been mine. She placed her hand on his shoulder, a gesture so intimate that my stomach churned, and Eldrick allowed it. In front of everyone. In front of me. Vespera. My name in his mouth sounded like an accusation. The healer confirmed it. You are barren. I tried to speak. I tried to say the test was wrong, that I felt life inside me, that Zuleika had swapped the vials, but the words died in my throat, choked by the weight of all those judging eyes. A barren Luna is dead weight. Eldrick rose, every word dropping like stone. You have failed your sole purpose. He descended the throne steps. Every step made my heart beat faster, more desperately. I knew that look, that cold determination. He had already decided. He had probably decided months, perhaps years ago. I just hadn't wanted to see it. Eldrick stopped before me. For one insane moment, I thought he might touch me gently, that he might whisper everything would be all right, that we would find another solution. But then he raised his hand, and I saw the claw emerge from his index finger. No. I, Eldrick, Alpha of the Silvercrest Pack, formally reject Vespera as my mate and Luna. His claw sliced through the air, severed the bond. I was not prepared for the pain. Nothing could have prepared me. It was as if someone had plunged a hand into my chest and ripped out something essential, something I hadn't even known existed until I felt its absence. My legs gave way. My knees hit the stone floor with a dull thud. A scream was born deep in my throat, but no sound came out. Only that silent pain, that emptiness tearing at my soul. The mate bond wasn't just emotional. It was physical. It was spiritual. It was every fiber of my being connected to him, and now all those fibers were being severed one by one. I doubled over, my hands clutching my chest, trying to hold on to something that no longer existed. Tears streamed down my face, but I barely felt them. All I felt was the emptiness, the cold, the absence. Zuleika laughed. The sound cut through the hall like a knife, and then came the final sentence. Take her to the border of the Ancestors' Glacier. Eldrick's voice carried no emotion. She no longer belongs to Silvercrest. The glacier. The place no one returned from. The territory of the primal lichens. The beasts who walked on two legs and tore apart entire packs. He wasn't just rejecting me, he was sentencing me to death. The guards hauled me up by my arms. I could barely stand, every movement sending waves of agony through my shattered body. They dragged me through the corridors that were once my home, past faces that were once my family. No one met my eyes. At the castle exit, the icy wind hit me like a slap. I trembled violently, my thin dress offering no protection. The glacier loomed on the horizon, a white, merciless wall against the gray sky. Wait. I barely recognized my own voice, hoarse and broken. Please, a coat. Anything. The guards hesitated. For a second I saw something akin to pity in the eyes of one of them. But then Zuleika appeared, as if she had followed only to savor my complete downfall. She carried something in her hands, a piece of fabric. My heart clung to that pathetic hope. Zuleika threw the shawl at my feet, fine as a spiderweb, torn in 3 places, useless. The cold preserves beauty, darling. She smiled, her red lips curving into pure poison. Maybe you'll finally be useful for something when they find your frozen body. I picked up the shawl, not because it would help me, but because it was the only thing I had, the only thing left of an entire life. The guards shoved me past the gates, and then, without looking back, I started to walk. The snow swallowed my bare feet. At first, the pain was searing, every step like treading on 1,000 needles. Then, gradually, numbness set in. I don't know if that was a relief or a warning that my body was giving up. The wind howled around me, carrying ice flakes that cut my exposed skin. I wrapped the useless shawl around my shoulders, more out of habit than hope. Silvercrest fell behind, the castle lights diminishing until they became distant golden dots. I thought of Eldrick, the way he looked at me, or rather, the way he looked right through me, as if I were already a ghost. I thought of Zuleika, the venom in her smile, the ease with which she destroyed everything I was. I thought of the years I wasted trying to be enough for a man who never truly wanted me. My knees buckled. I didn't even realize I had fallen until I felt the snow wetting my face. Get up, I ordered myself. Get up and keep walking. But my body did not obey. The numbness had crept up my legs, through my torso, into my arms. I was just a thinking head in a body that had already given up. It was then that my hand found my belly. Even through the numbness, I felt it. That minimal warmth, that spark of life the manipulated test hadn't been able to extinguish. My babies. Because there were two, I knew somehow. Two lives that depended on me to survive. And I was failing them. Tears froze before they reached my chin. My voice came out as a whisper, stolen by the wind. Forgive me. I closed my eyes. The darkness was almost comforting, like a blanket I didn't have. The cold no longer hurt. Nothing hurt anymore. I was floating, sinking, disappearing. The last thought I had was that Zuleika was right. The cold really does preserve. And perhaps, when spring came, someone would find my body and know that I wasn't barren, that I died carrying the heirs Eldrick threw away. Perhaps that would be justice enough. But then, on the edge of unconsciousness, something changed. A shadow covered the weak sun. A shadow too large to be anything natural. The ground trembled under heavy footsteps, and a musky scent invaded my nose. Even numb as it was, I wanted to open my eyes. I wanted to see what had arrived to finish the job. But the darkness was stronger. The last thing I felt, before unconsciousness took me completely, was warmth, an impossible heat in that frozen hell, and a voice, deep as distant thunder, that spoke only one word: found. Death had a smell. I always imagined it would be something soft, perhaps the perfume of the flowers my mother grew when I was a child, or the aroma of fresh bread from the castle kitchen, something comforting to guide the soul to the other side. But no, death smelled of wild musk, wet fur, ancient blood, and frozen earth. Death smelled like a predator. My eyes refused to open. My body floated in that space between sleep and nothing, too heavy to move, too light to sink completely. I knew something was there, something enormous, something that made the very air vibrate with its presence. I heard the sound of breathing. It wasn't mine. My breath was too faint, too shallow. This breathing was deep as a blacksmith's bellows, each exhalation carrying a moist heat that melted the snowflakes on my face. It was sniffing me. I felt the muzzle, or what I imagined to be a muzzle, pass over my neck, my collarbone, moving down to my belly. There, it stopped. A low sound emerged from that monstrous throat. It wasn't a growl of threat. It was something different, something that sounded almost like reverence. With the last thread of strength remaining to me, I opened my eyes and wished I hadn't. The creature before me was not a wolf. It was what wolves feared in their nightmares. Over 10 feet tall, covered in a lead-gray coat that seemed to absorb the faint sunlight. Its shoulders were wide as castle gates, its arms thick as oak trunks, ending in claws that could rip through steel. And the face. That face was the stuff of tales mothers used to frighten disobedient pups. A lichen. Lichens were legends, creatures from an earlier age, when wolves still walked with the gods. They said they had been exterminated, hunted to extinction by the alphas who feared their power. They said the last lichen had died 1,000 years ago, taking with him the secrets of ancient magic. They said many things. All were wrong. His eyes met mine. One was golden like the autumn sun, bright and penetrating. The other was white, blind, sliced by a deep scar that ran from his brow to his cheek. That gaze should have terrified me, should have made me scream, fight, try to flee even knowing it was impossible. But I was too tired for fear. Finish it. My voice came out like a dry leaf dragged by the wind. Please. The lichen tilted its head. The gesture was strangely human, strangely curious. He brought a claw to my belly again, touching it with an impossible delicacy for something so brutal. And then he spoke. Royal blood. The voice was thunder and earthquake, too deep to belong to any living creature. You carry royal blood in your womb, and they cast you out into the snow like trash. I didn't understand. Royal blood. My family was common, with no special lineage. Eldrick had always made it clear he married me only for political alliance, not for blood. But before I could ask, before any thought made sense, the darkness swallowed me again. This time, I didn't fight it. When I woke up, the world had changed. The first thing I felt was warmth. Not the artificial heat of fireplaces or blankets, but something alive, pulsating, emerging from the earth itself. Warm water enveloped my body up to my shoulders, steam rising in lazy spirals, and disappearing into the blue ice ceiling above me. A hot spring. Inside an ice cave. I sat up slowly, every muscle protesting. My entire body ached as if it had been crushed and reassembled. But I was alive. Against all logic, against all probability, I was alive. The cave was immense. Walls of ancient ice glowed in shades of blue and white, creating a natural cathedral that stole my breath. Crystal stalactites hung from the ceiling like divine chandeliers, refracting the light of a fire that crackled somewhere to my right. The smell of roasting meat invaded my nose. My stomach roared in response, a sound almost embarrassing in the sacred silence of that place. "You're awake." I turned so quickly I almost sank into the water. He was crouched near the fire, turning a piece of meat over the flames. He was no longer the colossal beast from the snow. He was a man, or something close to a man, 7 feet tall, maybe more, with shoulders that looked like they supported mountains. His hair was grizzled and silver, long and wild like the mane of a warhorse. The same scar ran across his face. The same blind eye gleamed with a light of its own. He wore thick furs, sewn roughly but functionally. When he rose and turned to me, I realized the difference between him and any alpha I had ever known. Silvercrest alphas displayed power like an expensive garment, something to be noticed and admired. This man, this creature, simply was power. It emanated from him like heat emanates from the sun. "Who are you?" My voice was still weak, but it had more substance now. "Oberon." He said the name as if it explained everything. Perhaps it did. King of what remains of the lichens. King. Of course, he was a king. He walked to the edge of the hot spring and extended a piece of meat skewered on a stick. The offer was simple, without ceremony. I hesitated for an instant, my wounded pride whispering that I shouldn't accept anything from anyone. But my stomach was louder than my pride. The meat was perfect, succulent, seasoned only with salt and herbs I didn't recognize. I devoured it in seconds, without elegance, without shame. Oberon watched in silence. When I finished, he spoke again. "You were dead when I found you, your heart beating out of stubbornness, not life." He sat on a nearby rock, his knees nearly level with my face even sitting. Any other she-wolf would have given up. Any other she-wolf wasn't pregnant. The words escaped before I could stop them. My hand flew to my belly, the instinctive gesture of protection. The babies. By the goddess, the babies. "They are well," Oberon said, as if reading my mind. "The blood they carry is stronger than the cold." I stared at him, the question burning on my tongue. "You mentioned royal blood before. I have no special lineage. Eldrick always said, Eldrick is a fool who wouldn't recognize true power if it bit him." The contempt in his voice was palpable. "The blood doesn't come from you. It comes from him, the alpha who discarded you. Recessive lineage dormant for generations. But when it mixed with something in you..." He paused, studying my face. It woke up. Eldrick had royal blood. Eldrick, who called me Baron. Eldrick, who threw me out to die. Eldrick had no idea what he had wasted. A hysterical laugh bubbled in my throat. I swallowed it. "Why did you save me?" I finally asked, the only question that truly mattered. "What do you gain from this?" Oberon looked at me for a long moment. That golden eye seemed to see through my skin, my bones, straight into my soul. "Because you carry the future," he said simply. And they threw it away, like trash. The months that followed were a transformation. Oberon did not treat me like a fragile refugee. Once my strength returned, he taught me to survive in the glacier, how to hunt in the deep snow, how to read the stars when storms extinguished everything else, how to listen to the ice before it broke. My belly grew, and with it, my connection to the children inside me. I felt their personalities even before they were born. One was storm, brute force, fierce protection. The other was silence, depth, a wisdom that did not belong to this world. Oberon felt it too. Sometimes I caught him with his hand resting on my belly, his eyes closed, an almost imperceptible smile on his lips. He never explained what he sensed, but the reverence on his face said enough. The birth came on a night of the full moon. The pain was immediate and overwhelming. I woke with a scream caught in my throat, warm liquid running down my legs. Oberon was by my side in seconds, his normally unshakable face showing something that looked like concern. "Too early," he murmured. lifting me into his arms as if I weighed nothing. We were still a moon away. He carried me to a deeper chamber of the cave, where the thermal water was warmer and ancient symbols were carved into the ice walls. The air vibrated with ancient energy, with magic that existed before wolves, before men. The next few hours were a blur of agony. I screamed, pushed, cried. My body opened up in ways I didn't know were possible. At some point, I started bleeding more than I should. The cave spun around me. "They are too strong," Oberon said, his voice reaching me from far away. "They are tearing you apart from the inside." "I don't care," I gasped, pushing again. "Save them. Promise me you'll save them." The roar that escaped him made the stalactites tremble. "I will save all of you." He sliced his own wrist with a claw. The blood that streamed out was not red like mine. It was golden, bright, hot as molten metal. With surprisingly gentle fingers, he traced symbols on my belly, on my thighs, murmuring words in a language I didn't know. The pain didn't lessen, but something changed. Strength flowed into me. Strength that wasn't mine. I pushed one last time, and the first cry echoed in the cave. My boy. Black hair like mine. Eyes that briefly flashed with golden light before turning brown. Zephyr, I thought. Gale. But there was no time for awe. The second baby was coming. She was born in silence. No cry. No sound. For one terrifying moment, I thought she was dead. But then her eyes opened. White as milk. Eyes that did not see this world but saw others. Ilawan. My mystery girl. Oberon held them. One in each immense arm. Looking at them as one contemplates newborn stars. The ritual. I whispered. Too weak for more than that. What did you do? He touched the forehead of each baby with blood from his own wrist. Where the blood touched, marks formed. Symbols that pulsed once before disappearing beneath the skin. I adopted them, Oberon said, his voice heavy with an emotion I still couldn't name. Before the ancestors and the spirits of the glacier, they are mine as much as yours. My children. Our children. Heirs to a kingdom of ice I barely knew. I wanted to ask more, wanted to understand everything, but exhaustion finally overcame me. The last thing I saw before falling asleep was Oberon holding the twins against his chest, singing a lullaby in the ancient tongue. And for the first time since my banishment, I felt at home. 5 years, 5 winters, 5 springs that never truly arrived in the glacier, just variations of white and blue, of storm and calm. 5 years of transformation so complete that sometimes I looked at my reflection in the melted ice puddles and didn't recognize the woman staring back. The Vespera of Silvercrest had died in that snow. The woman who replaced her was another creature entirely. My bare feet barely felt the cold as I ran. The ice yielded under my weight, but I knew every texture, every hidden trap. My body moved with a fluidity I never knew I possessed, muscles trained by years of hunting, of survival, of refusing weakness. The stag was 200 meters ahead. I could smell it, musk and fear. I could hear its accelerated heart beating like a distant drum. It knew it was being hunted. It just didn't know where death would come from. I slowed, my steps becoming absolute silence. The bow in my hands was made of ancient lichen bone, a gift from Oberon on my first anniversary in the glacier. The arrows were compressed ice, sharp as razors, forged by the magic I had learned to channel. The stag stopped. Its ears swiveled, searching for the danger it felt but couldn't locate. I raised the bow. I drew the string until it touched my cheek. I exhaled slowly, letting the world narrow until there was only me, the arrow, and the target. I released. The sound was almost musical. A hiss cutting through the cold air, followed by the dull impact of the arrow finding its mark. The stag fell without a sound. Death arriving before the fear could turn into pain. I walked to it, kneeling beside it. My hands found the warm fur as I murmured the words of gratitude Oberon taught me. Every life taken deserved acknowledgement. Every death fed another life. The cycle was sacred. I hoisted the stag onto my shoulders. It weighed almost as much as I did, but my muscles didn't even protest. The woman who collapsed in the snow with a torn shawl seemed like a cruel joke now. A pathetic version of myself that I had buried along with the broken bond. The path back to the cave was as familiar as my own breath. I leaped over cracks in the ice, slid down slopes that would have killed any common wolf, navigating the crystal labyrinth that protected our home from intruders. When the cave entrance appeared ahead, I heard the laughter. My heart instantly warmed. That sound was my reason for existing, my reason for having survived. Zephyr and Elowen were in the training ground, a clearing of packed ice surrounded by natural walls. My boy, 5 years of wild life and impossible strength, was in a combat stance. His black hair was messy as always, his brown eyes gleaming with fierce determination. In front of him, Oberon waited. The Lycan King was crouched down to be closer to the boy's height, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Come on, little Gale." Oberon's voice carried affectionate teasing. "You promised today would be different." Zephyr growled. The sound was impressive coming from such a small child, a low vibration that made the air tremble. He charged, his small feet thundering on the ice, his arms outstretched to push. When his hands hit Oberon, I saw the impossible happen. The Lycan King, 7 feet of muscle and ancestral power, slid backward. Not much, maybe 3 centimeters. But those centimeters represented more force than any adult wolf I had ever known. Oberon's laughter echoed through the clearing, genuine and proud. "Well done!" He scooped Zephyr up in his arms, tossing him high and catching him again. 3 more centimeters than yesterday. Soon you'll be knocking me down. Zephyr giggled, all the seriousness of the mini-warrior evaporating into childlike joy. "I'm going to be stronger than you one day, Father." "Father?" The word still hit me like a warm wave every time I heard it. The twins had started calling Oberon that around age 3, naturally, without anyone teaching them. He had cried that day. Me too. I deposited the stag in the snow and approached, my eyes seeking my other half. Elowen was sitting on a nearby rock, her legs crossed, her face turned toward the weak sun as if she could absorb its warmth. Her hair was the perfect opposite of her brother's, white as the surrounding snow, falling in soft waves to her waist. Her milky eyes were closed, but I knew she saw more than all of us combined. She wasn't truly blind. She was blind to this world because her eyes saw others. They saw the past, the future, the spirits who walked among the living. They saw truths we preferred to hide. When I drew near, she turned her face toward me. A gentle smile curved her lips. "Mama's back." Her voice didn't come from her mouth. It was born directly in my mind, clear as a crystal bell. "The stag was fast. You were faster." I knelt before her, holding her small hands in mine. Her skin was always cold, as if she carried a bit of the eternal winter within her. "Did you see the hunt?" I asked aloud, knowing she didn't need words to hear me, but preferring the normalcy of sound. She nodded, and then her face changed. The gentleness vanished. Her white eyes widened, and for a moment I saw something moving in those eyes, shadows dancing in milk. Her hands gripped mine with surprising strength. "Storm coming, Mama." Her mental voice was different now, deeper, burdened with weight. Bad men, blood in the Green Valley, wolves crying. My heart froze. Elowen did not have false visions. What she saw happened. "When, my flower? When does this happen?" She tilted her head, as if listening to something distant. "The moon will fill and empty twice. Then they come. Then you decide." Before I could ask more, Oberon was by my side. He had heard somehow. Perhaps through the bond that had formed between us over the years. Perhaps simply because he always seemed to know when something was wrong. Zephyr held his father's hand, looking at his sister with concern. Unlike most children, he was never afraid of Elowen's powers. He protected her fiercely, as if he knew from birth that this was his role. "She had a vision," I said, unnecessarily. Oberon nodded, his golden eye fixed on Elowen. "What did you see, little wise one?" Elowen let go of my hands and extended her arms to him. Oberon lifted her easily, nestling her against his chest. She touched his face, her small fingers tracing the scar. "The wolf who hurt you," she said this time aloud, the words coming out slow and careful as they always did when she chose to speak. "He is dying. His valley dies with him. Silvercrest." She was talking about Silvercrest, about Eldrick. A part of me, the part he destroyed years ago, felt a grim satisfaction. Let him die, I thought. Let everything he built rot like the lie it was. But another part, the part Oberon had rebuilt with patience and care, knew it wasn't that simple. Later, after the twins fell asleep in a tangle of limbs and fur blankets, Oberon and I sat at the cave entrance. The stars shone with impossible intensity in the clear glacier sky. The silence was almost tangible. He was close, not touching, but close enough that I felt the heat radiating from his skin. Years ago, this proximity would have made me nervous. Now, it was as natural as breathing. You're thinking about them. It wasn't a question. I sighed, watching my breath condense into a white cloud. It's hard not to. Eldrick destroyed my life. Zuleika sent me to die. And now, to know Silvercrest is collapsing. Gives you pleasure? I considered the question honestly. It should. A part of me wants it to. I paused. But the people of Silvercrest did nothing. The families, the children, the common wolves who just followed orders. They don't deserve to pay for the mistakes of a weak alpha. Oberon didn't answer immediately. He reached out and brushed away a lock of hair the wind had tossed onto my face. The gesture was intimate in a way that still surprised me. Delicate, coming from hands that could crush stone. You are a queen without a crown, Vespera. His voice was deep, almost reverent. And Silvercrest is rotting without you. I turned to face him. We were too close. I could see every detail of his face, the lines of expression that told centuries of stories, the texture of the scar, the shine of the golden eye that seemed to hold ancient fires. I am not a queen of anything, I said, but my voice came out weak. You are queen of everything, he corrected. Queen of this mountain. Queen of those children. Queen, he hesitated. Rare for someone so certain of everything. Queen of what remains of my heart, if you want it. My breath hitched. We had danced around this truth for years, in touches that lasted longer than they should, in looks that said what words could not, in the way he held me when the nightmares came. But we had never named it. Naming made it real, and real could be lost. Oberon, you don't have to answer, he said quickly. Not now, not ever if you prefer. He exhaled heavily. You should know. The moment hung between us, fragile as thin ice. I wanted to say everything I felt, that he had saved me in more ways than just physically, that he was home in a way Silvercrest never was, that I didn't know when gratitude turned into something more, only that it had transformed. But before the words could form, Elowen screamed. We were both on our feet in a second, running inside. The girl was sitting up in bed, her white eyes completely open, tears streaming down her face. They sold it, she cried, loudly, with her mouth this time. He sold the land of bones. The ancestors are screaming. Mama, they are screaming. Zephyr woke with the noise, immediately positioning himself between his sister and any invisible threat. I rushed to the bed, pulling Elowen onto my lap. Her small body trembled violently. Shh, my flower. I'm here. What did you see? What land? The sacred clearing. Her voice was hoarse from screaming. Where the first wolves are buried. Eldrick sold it to the bone scavengers. They will dig. They will profane. The spirits will go mad. The sacred clearing. Silvercrest's most ancient site, where the ancestors of all packs in the region rested. Selling that land was more than blasphemy. It was spiritual suicide. I looked at Oberon. He stood in the entrance, his body tense, his fists clenched. If the spirits are disturbed, he said slowly, they won't just attack Silvercrest. Their fury will spread. The entire region will suffer. My children, my home, everything I had built over the last 5 years. The decision formed in my chest like crystallizing ice. There was no more time to consider, to weigh, to fear. We go down the mountain, I said, and my voice did not tremble. Oberon met my eyes. I saw pride there, and something more, something that warmed parts of me I thought permanently frozen. When do we leave? He asked. I looked at the twins. Zephyr was still in a protective stance. Elowen had stopped shaking, her white eyes fixed on me with a certainty that did not belong to a 5-year-old child. It is time, Mama, she said mentally. The Winter Queen needs to reclaim her throne. I held her tighter. I kissed her forehead. I kissed Zephyr's forehead when he drew close. Tomorrow, I answered finally. Tomorrow the storm descends, and deep within the cave, I swore I heard the ancestors applauding. The descent took 3 days. 3 days of paths only Oberon knew. Secret passages through the ice that had remained untouched for centuries. The twins didn't complain once. Zephyr marched with a soldier's determination, his brown eyes constantly scanning the surroundings for threats. Elowen walked hand in hand with me, her steps surprisingly sure for someone who didn't see the physical world. The spirits show the way, she explained when I asked. They like me. On the third day, when the ice began to give way to rocks and the rocks to frozen grass, I felt the change in the air. The smell of Silvercrest invaded my nose like a memory I had tried to bury. Pine trees, smoke from fireplaces, and beneath it all, something rotten, something sick. We stopped on an elevation that overlooked the entire valley. Silvercrest stretched out below us, and my heart clenched with a mixture of anger and sadness. I remembered the green, prosperous valley, the cultivated fields, the well-kept houses, the proud castle at the center. What I saw now was a faded shadow of that memory. The fields were abandoned, overgrown with weeds. Several houses had collapsed roofs. The castle still stood, but even from a distance I could see the cracks in the walls, the peeling paint, the ragged banners. 5 years, I murmured. 5 years, and he destroyed everything. Oberon stood by my side, his presence solid and comforting. He had assumed a more human form for the descent, though he was still impossibly large, impossibly intimidating. The people are starving, he said, sniffing the air. I smelled despair. Zephyr tugged on the hem of my clothes. When I looked down, I saw his eyes shining with anger that did not belong to a child. Is that the bad place, Mother? Where they hurt you? I knelt before him, holding his face between my hands. It is, my love, but we won't let them hurt anyone else. He nodded seriously. Can I break the bad men? Despite everything, I smiled. Maybe 1 or 2. Allow approached, touching my arm. Feast, she said mentally. They feast while the people weep. The cowardly wolf drinks wine over empty bones. The spring festival. Of course. Eldrick always loved festivals. Always loved displaying wealth that wasn't his. Power he didn't deserve. Even with the kingdom collapsing, he still found excuses to celebrate. Perfect, I said, standing up. Then let's give them something to truly remember. We reached the walls as the sun began to set. The festival was in full swing inside the castle. I could hear the music, the laughter, the clinking of goblets. I could smell the abundant food while the surrounding houses remained silent and hungry. The guards at the gates were drunk. They barely paid attention as we approached, and by the time they registered our presence, it was too late to do anything. Oberon gave a low growl, and the 2 men collapsed from pure fear. Useful, I commented. He shrugged, a gesture that was almost human. Saves energy for what matters. We walked through the streets of Silvercrest like ghosts. The few people who were outside stepped away when they saw us, eyes wide, mouths open. I wasn't surprised no one recognized me. The Vespera they knew was a pale shadow, broken, submissive. The woman walking now wore white polar bear furs, a crown of crystallized ice in her black hair, and radiated a cold that made breath condense. Zephyr walked on my right, small, but radiating a threat that adult wolves instinctively recognized. Eloan floated on my left, guided by spirits visible only to her, her white eyes making everyone who crossed her path look away. And behind us, Oberon. He had not assumed full lichen form yet, but his humanoid form was terrifying enough. Every step he took made the ground tremble. Every breath was a reminder of contained power, of violence waiting for permission to be unleashed. When we reached the doors of the banquet hall, I stopped. The sky above us was clear, blue with touches of pink from the sunset. I reached out and summoned the winter. The response was immediate. Clouds formed from nothing, thick and heavy, swallowing the blue in a sea of gray. The temperature plummeted so quickly that I heard the cracking of puddles freezing instantly. Snow began to fall, softly at first, then in furious gusts that made the castle torches flicker. Inside the hall, the music stopped. I heard confused voices, running footsteps, someone shouting about the weather change. Mama. Zephyr tugged my hand, smiling. Can I? I looked at the massive wooden and iron doors. I looked at my 5-year-old son, who vibrated with contained energy. You may. He ran. His small feet hammered the stone floor. When he hit the gates, he didn't slow down. He simply shoved with both hands. The sound was glorious. Wood splintering. Iron twisting. Hinges ripped from stone walls. The gates didn't open. They exploded inward, fragments flying into the hall, hitting tables, knocking over goblets, eliciting screams of terror. And then, through the destroyed opening, I walked in. The banquet hall was exactly as I remembered and completely different at the same time. The same marble columns, The same crystal chandeliers, the same tapestries on the walls, but everything seemed smaller now, weaker, more pathetic. The tables were laden with food while the people starved. Wine flowed like water while children begged in the streets. Nobles wore silks and jewels while servants wore rags. And in the center of it all, on the raised throne I once occupied beside him, sat Eldrick. The years had not been kind. He was still handsome in that polished, superficial way that once fooled me. But there was a slackness to his jaw now, a redness to his nose that betrayed too many nights of drinking. The eyes that once seemed intense were now dull, empty. Zuleika was next to him, exactly where I predicted. She wore a red dress that was too obscene for a Luna, too many jewels for a failing pack. She was visibly drunk, leaning on the arm of the throne, laughing at something a servant had said. Silence fell like a guillotine when we entered. All eyes turned to us. I saw expressions ranging from confusion to terror, from shock to disbelief. I saw wolves who were once my acquaintances, elders who witnessed my humiliation, guards who dragged me out of the castle. I saw everything, and I felt nothing but cold. The snow poured in through the hole that used to be the gates, covering the marble floor, extinguishing the festive decorations under white shrouds. The wind howled like an angry pack, making the chandeliers sway dangerously. Eldrick rose from the throne. The goblet in his hand shook, spilling red wine onto his clothes. His face was white as the snow invading his hall. Vespera? His voice came out strangled, unrecognizable. You died. I walked across the hall, every step deliberate, every movement heavy with purpose. The crowd drew away from me, as if I radiated physical danger. And perhaps I did. I stopped 10 steps from the throne, close enough to see the terror in his eyes, distant enough to show he didn't deserve my proximity. "The cold preserves, Eldrick," I said, and my voice filled the hall without me needing to shout. Zuleika was right. Zuleika. The mention of her name snapped her out of her alcoholic stupor. She tried to straighten up, tried to assume some posture of authority, but her wide eyes betrayed the fear she felt. "Guards!" she shrieked, her voice shrill. "Arrest this intruder!" No one moved. The guards looked at Oberon, who had stopped in the ruined entrance, his silhouette blocking the remaining daylight. Even in humanoid form, he was clearly something beyond any wolf they had ever faced. Eldrick took a hesitant step forward, his eyes finally noticing the twins beside me. Who are those children?" Zephyr growled. The sound was low, but it carried a threat that made everyone in the hall step back. Alawan simply smiled, her white eyes fixed on something no one else could see. "These are my children," I said, and let every word sink in. "The children you told me I could never have. The heirs you threw into the snow to die." The silence that followed was absolute. I saw slow comprehension crawl across Eldrick's face, followed by shock, followed by horror. "Impossible," he whispered. The test was manipulated." I turned my gaze to Zuleika, who had paled so much she looked about to faint. "Your mistress swapped the vials. Your mistress condemned me to death. Your mistress nearly killed your own heirs." "Lies," Zuleika screamed, but her voice trembled. "She's lying. She was always crazy, always making up stories." Alawan let go of my hand. The girl walked forward, her bare steps silent on the snow-covered floor. The crowd pulled away from her as if she were made of fire. She stopped before Zuleika. She tilted her head, that curious gesture that meant she was seeing something beyond the visible. "You dream of spiders," Alawan said aloud. "Spiders that crawl into your mouth while you sleep. Spiders that lay eggs in your stomach. That's why you don't eat in the morning." Zuleika stumbled backward, her face contorted in absolute terror. How do you know?" "I see everything," Alawan said simply. "I see your secrets. Do you want me to tell the others?" The elders of Silvercrest began to murmur. I saw recognition on some faces. "Seer," they whispered. "The girl is a seer." But Alawan wasn't finished. She walked around Zuleika, her white eyes never blinking. "You are afraid of the dark because it was in the dark that your father beat you. You steal jewels from the mortuary because you think no one notices. She stopped, her head tilting to the side. "You swapped the blue vial for the green one in the infirmary, the night before Mama's examination." The hall exploded in whispers. Zuleika fell to her knees, her hands covering her face. No. Get out of my head. Get out! But it was what happened next that sealed her fate. Under the pressure of Eloan's mind exposing her secrets, under the weight of years of buried guilt, Zuleika broke. The words gushed from her like poison from an open wound. I swapped them. I swapped them because you were going to take him away from me. You and your belly and your heirs. I poisoned the test, and I would poison it again. I poisoned half the council who were loyal to you. I poisoned the crops, so the people would blame your memory. She stopped, realizing what she had done. The silence was deafening. Eldrick looked at Zuleika as if seeing her for the first time. The woman he chose over me. The woman who destroyed his pack from the inside out. You... His voice was dead. You destroyed everything. Zuleika tried to get up, tried to run, but her legs wouldn't obey. She collapsed again, sobbing, begging for forgiveness that no one was willing to offer. I turned my gaze away from her. She didn't deserve any more of my attention. At that moment, heavy footsteps echoed through the hall. The crowd parted, and Oberon walked in. But he was no longer in humanoid form. While I held everyone's attention, he had shifted. 10 feet tall, lead-gray fur absorbing the light, claws capable of tearing stone apart. The lichen emerged from the shadows like an ancient god taking form. The oldest elders, those who knew the legends, fell to their knees immediately. The Lichen King, one of them whispered, his voice trembling with reverence. He exists. He is real. One by one the others followed. Nobles, guards, servants, all kneeling before the power they hadn't seen for 1,000 years. All except Eldrick. He remained standing, because his pride allowed nothing else. But I saw the devastating realization in his eyes as he looked at me, at the twins, at Oberon. He rejected the Lichen King's mate. He rejected the mother of the Lichen King's heirs. He rejected everything. And finally, I saw true fear on the face of the man who destroyed my life. The storm howled outside. The snow covered everything, and I was just getting started. The silence in the hall was so dense that I could hear the snowflakes landing on the marble. Everyone remained kneeling before Oberon, heads bowed, bodies trembling. The fear in the air was almost palpable, an acidic smell that mingled with the spilled wine and the forgotten food. The chandeliers swayed in the wind, rushing through the destroyed gates, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Only Eldrick remained standing. His pride was always greater than his intelligence. Even now, even facing an ancestral power that could crush him with a single blow, he refused to bend his knee, as if standing tall could somehow restore the dignity he had lost. This is ridiculous. His voice trembled, betraying his bravado. You will kneel for a beast? For a rejected she-wolf and her bastards? The word sliced through the air like a blade. Bastards. I felt it before I saw it. A vibration in the floor, a displacement of air, a blur of movement I barely caught. Zephyr crossed the hall like a bullet. My 5-year-old boy, with messy black hair and eyes burning with fury, hit Eldrick's leg with a headbutt that carried impossible force. The sound was something I will never forget. A dry, definitive crack, like a thick branch snapping in half. Eldrick's femur bone yielded under the impact, shattering in at least 3 places. The scream that emerged from him was not human. It was something primitive, animalistic, ripped from the depths of a pain that transcended words. Eldrick collapsed, his hands flying to his destroyed leg, his face contorted in a mask of agony. He broke my leg! Eldrick's voice was shrill, unrecognizable. A pup broke my leg! Zephyr walked back to my side, wiping his hands on his clothes as if he had just finished a chore. There was no remorse in his eyes, only quiet satisfaction. He called us a bad name, Mother, he explained simply. I placed my hand on his shoulder. I know, my love. I looked at Eldrick writhing on the floor, the blood starting to stain his expensive clothes, his screams gradually turning into pathetic moans. A part of me, that old wounded part he had created, felt a surge of grim satisfaction. But I was no longer that person. Someone help him, I ordered, and 2 servants hurried to obey. As they lifted Eldrick and placed him in a chair, Zuleika tried to use the distraction to escape. She crawled across the floor, her nails scraping against the marble, moving toward a side door. Her breath was ragged, her eyes glazed with terror. In her right hand, I saw the glint of something metallic. A dagger. Zuleika spun at the last second, launching herself toward me with the blade raised. The movement was desperate, clumsy, born of pure survival instinct. The tip of the dagger flashed under the chandelier light as it cut the air toward my heart. I did not move. I didn't need to. Alawan turned her white eyes toward Zuleika, and everything stopped. The woman froze in the air, the dagger inches from my chest. It wasn't physical ice holding her. It was something worse, something that came from within. Zuleika began to tremble. Small tremors at first, then violent spasms that shook her entire body. The dagger fell from her numb fingers and clattered on the floor, and then she began to scream. They were not screams of physical pain. They were the screams of someone watching hell open before their eyes. Zuleika scratched her own face, leaving red marks on her cheeks, trying to ward off something only she could see. "Spiders!" she shrieked. "Spiders everywhere! They're on me! They're inside me!" She dropped to her knees, her hands frantically hitting her body, trying to swat away invisible insects. "Father, no. Please. No. I'll be good. I promise I'll be good." The screams echoed through the hall, each one more disturbing than the last. Zuleika was reliving all her nightmares simultaneously, all her darkest memories replayed in vivid color inside her mind. And then, between the sobs and pleas, the confessions began to gush out again. "I swapped the vials. In the infirmary. I bribed the healer with gold I stole from the royal treasury." She tore at her own hair now. "I poisoned Counselor Mira because she was suspicious. I poisoned the crops so the people would blame your memory. She stopped, realizing what she had done. The silence was deafening. Eldrick, even with his destroyed leg, looked at Zuleika with an expression of absolute horror. The woman he had rejected me for. The woman he put in my place. The woman who destroyed everything he supposedly loved. "Enough," I said softly. Alawan blinked, and the torment ceased. Zuleika collapsed completely, a heap of rags and disheveled hair sobbing on the floor. She was no longer a threat. She was nothing. I turned to the elders, those men and women who had witnessed my humiliation 5 years ago. Some of them had looked away when they dragged me out. Others had laughed along with the crowd. None had raised their voice in my defense. "You heard," I said, and my voice was ice. "You heard her confession. Every death, every sickness, every failure of this kingdom is at the hands of the woman you accepted as Luna." The oldest elder, a wolf named Hadrian whom I vaguely remembered from the council, raised his head. There was shame in his eyes. "Lady Vespera," his voice was hoarse. We did not know." "You chose not to know," I corrected. "It is different." Oberon moved for the first time since we entered. Every step he took made the hall tremble. When he stopped beside me, his presence was so overwhelming that several wolves bowed even lower, touching their foreheads to the floor. He did not speak. He didn't need to. His presence said everything that needed to be said. I walked to the throne, the same throne from which Eldrick had pronounced my sentence, the same throne from which he severed our bond, the same throne that represented everything that was taken from me. I climbed the steps slowly, savoring each one. When I turned to face the hall, I saw what they saw. A queen of ice and fury, flanked by an ancient god and 2 children who carried powers beyond comprehension. "Silvercrest no longer has an alpha," I declared. "Silvercrest no longer has a Luna. What you have is a man who sold your sacred lands to pay for parties, and a woman who poisoned her own people." I looked at Eldrick. He was pale as wax, sweating with pain, but his eyes still carried a remnant of that stupid pride. "The sacred clearing," I said, and I saw the recognition on his face. "You sold the place where our ancestors rest. To bone scavengers, to desecrators. I needed money." He spat the words. The treasury was empty. Zuleika said no one would notice. "Zuleika," I repeated. "Always Zuleika. Always someone else to blame." I stepped down from the throne and walked to him. The servants holding him backed away, leaving him exposed. I knelt to meet his eyes. For a moment, I saw the man he had been. The young, ambitious alpha who promised me the world. The mate who marked my neck under the full moon. The husband I thought I loved. All lies. All facade. "I should kill you," I said softly, just for him to hear. "It would be easy. It would be just. You sentenced me to death after all." The fear in his eyes was genuine now. All the arrogance had evaporated, replaced by the primitive terror of a prey before its predator. "Please." The word came out as a whisper. "Vespera, please." I was tricked. Zuleika manipulated me. I never wanted to. You did want to. I interrupted him. You wanted every bit of it. She just gave you permission. I stood up and stepped away. But I will not kill you, Eldrick. He exhaled, relief beginning to soften his features. Death is too easy. I continued, and watched the relief die. Death is quick. Death is oblivion. I walked to where the torn shawl lay. The same shawl Zuleika had given me on the night of my banishment. I had kept it for 5 years. Carried it with me as a reminder. As a promise. I picked up the rotten cloth and walked back toward Eldrick and Zuleika. You will live, I declared, throwing the shawl over them. Without a pack, without a name, without territory. You will be exiled beyond the known borders, with nothing but the clothes on your backs, and this shawl. Zuleika sobbed louder. Eldrick opened his mouth to protest, but I wasn't finished. Every pack will be warned. Every territory, every village, every sanctuary. You will be known for what you did. No one will offer shelter. No one will offer food. You will rely only on each other. I smiled, and it was a smile of ice. After all, you are mates now, aren't you? How ironic that you finally have to live with the consequences of that choice. The guards moved to take the two of them. Eldrick tried to fight, but his destroyed leg made him useless. Zuleika didn't even try. She was empty, broken beyond repair. As they dragged them out of the hall, Eldrick turned his head one last time. You will regret this, he screamed. One day you will realize that. I realize many things, Eldrick. I interrupted him. I realized I wasted years of my life trying to be enough for someone who never valued me. I realized I nearly died for a man who didn't even deserve my indifference. I held Zephyr's hand on one side, and Elowen's on the other. But most of all, I realized that the best thing you ever did for me was reject me. The expression on his face as the doors closed was the most satisfying thing I had ever seen. The hall remained silent for a long moment. The nobles and elders continued kneeling, uncertain of what to do, uncertain of their own fate. Hadrian was the first to speak again. Lady, your majesty. He corrected himself. What will become of Silvercrest now? I looked at Oberon. He returned my gaze with that golden eye that seemed to hold ancient suns. There was a question there. An offer. Silvercrest needs a Luna, I said slowly. It needs leadership that puts the people above feasts and pride. Silvercrest needs you, Hadrian said, and other elders murmured agreement. I considered. A part of me wanted to refuse. I wanted to return to the glacier, to the peace we had built, to the simple life away from intrigue and betrayal. But Elowen squeezed my hand. The spirits want this, Mama, she said mentally. The ancestors want this. You need to heal what was broken. And Zephyr looked at me with those eyes too serious for 5 years. We can help the people, Mother. Make them not hungry anymore. My children. My reason for existing. I looked at Oberon again. And you? What do you want? He moved, his lichen form shrinking gradually until he returned to his humanoid shape. Even so, he dominated the hall, a mountain among hills. I want whatever you want, he said simply. My place is by your side, whether in the glacier or in a castle, whether in the ice or in the valley. Wherever you are, I will be. My heart warmed. That impossible heat in the midst of so much ice. I turned to the elders. Silvercrest will have its Luna, I declared. But things will be different. The storehouses will be open to the people. The sacred lands will be reclaimed. The bone scavengers will be expelled, and the clearing will be purified. The elders nodded eagerly. And one last thing, I said, my voice softening for the first time. I will not rule alone. Oberon approached. I took his hand, that enormous hand that could crush stones but held mine with infinite delicacy. Silvercrest will have a king too. The coronation took place under the first full moon after the storm. The hall that witnessed my humiliation was transformed. The banquet tables were removed, replaced by rows of wolves of all classes, nobles next to servants, warriors next to healers, children on their parents' shoulders, craning their necks for a better view. There was no more division, no more hierarchy of privilege, just the people of Silvercrest, gathered to witness the start of a new era. I stood in the center of the hall, wearing the same white furs I wore on the day of my return. My black hair fell loose down my back, contrasting with the white like ink on snow. The crown of ice and crystal that Oberon had made for me shone under the torchlight, refracting rainbows onto the stone walls. Zephyr and Elowin were by my side. My boy wore his first formal outfit, a set of white leather he complained was too tight. My girl wore a dress of pale silk, her white hair braided with small, non-melting ice flowers. And before me, kneeling, was Oberon, the Lichen King, bowed before a she-wolf the world had discarded. Hadrian, the oldest elder, conducted the ceremony. His voice trembled with emotion as he recited the ancient words. Who presents this woman as Luna of Silvercrest? The ancestors present her. Elowin's voice echoed through the hall, loud and clear, surprising everyone. She rarely spoke aloud, but when she did, the world listened. I hear their voices. They chose her before she was born. A murmur went through the crowd. Seers were rare. Seers who spoke for the ancestors were legends. Hadrian nodded, visibly shaken. And who guarantees the protection of this Luna? Zephyr stepped forward, his fists clenched, his chin raised. I guarantee it. His voice was small but firm. Anyone who hurts my mother will have to go through me first. Some soft laughter echoed through the hall, but it quickly died. Everyone had heard what happened to Eldric's leg. No one doubted the promise. Hadrian turned to Oberon. And you, King of the Lichens, what do you offer this union? Oberon raised his head. That golden eye met mine, and I saw everything that words could not express. Centuries of loneliness, years of silent care, an eternity of devotion. I offer my strength to protect her, he said, his deep voice filling every corner of the hall. My wisdom to advise her, my loyalty, until my last breath. He paused, and something softened on his face, and my heart, which has belonged to her since the moment I found her dying in the snow. My breath hitched. Tears burned my eyes, but I held them back. Queens did not cry in public, even queens who had waited a lifetime to hear words like that. Hadrian turned to me. Vespera, do you accept the crown of Silvercrest? Do you agree to govern this people with justice and compassion? Do you accept this man as your mate and king? I looked at the crowd. I saw faces that once scorned me now, looking at me with hope. I saw children who looked too skeletal, adults who looked too tired. I saw a kingdom that desperately needed healing. And I saw my family, my children, my mate. I accept. Hadrian picked up the ancient crown of Silvercrest, a silver circle interwoven with green stones that represented the valley. He raised it above my head. Then, before the ancestors and the living, I declare Vespera the Luna of Silvercrest. May your reign be long and prosperous. The crown descended upon my hair, and the hall exploded in howls of celebration. But the ceremony was not over. I turned and took the crown of ice that Oberon had made. It was an impossible work of art, eternal crystals shaped in ways that defied nature. I held it with reverence as I walked to him. Oberon was still kneeling. The Lichen King bowed before me. Rise, I said softly. He obeyed, rising to his full height. Even in humanoid form, he towered over me. I had to stretch my arms to reach his head. Before all present here, my voice carried an authority I didn't know I possessed. I declare Oberon, King of the Lichens, as my mate and King of Silvercrest. May our reign bring the union between the wolves of the valley and the lichens of the mountain. I placed the crown of ice upon his silver hair. It settled as if it had been made for him, because it had been. Oberon took my hand and brought it to his lips. My mate, he murmured against my skin. My Luna, my queen. The howls resumed, louder this time. Zephyr and Elowin rushed to us, and suddenly we were a tangle of arms and laughter. Oberon lifted Zephyr onto his shoulders while I embraced Elowin, and for one perfect moment, the weight of the world disappeared. We were just a family, strange, unlikely, born of ice and pain, but a family nonetheless. The following weeks were a whirlwind of change. The royal storehouses were opened on the first day. I personally supervised the distribution of grains, meat, and vegetables to the neediest families. Seeing the children eat until they were satisfied, seeing the mothers crying with relief, was worth every second of pain I had endured. The bone scavengers were expelled on the third day. Oberon personally led the operation, his lichen form terrifying the desecrators until they fled without looking back. The sacred clearing was purified through ancient rituals he knew, and the spirits finally rested. The lands Eldrick had sold were recovered. Some through negotiation, others through intimidation. No one dared refuse when the Lichen King appeared at their door. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, Silvercrest began to heal. The fields were replanted. The houses were repaired. The children started playing in the streets again. The smell of rot I had felt upon arrival was replaced by something cleaner, more hopeful. One morning, about a month after the coronation, I woke up before dawn. The bed beside me was empty. Oberon had left, likely to patrol the borders as he did every night. I got up and walked to the royal bedroom window. The view from there showed the entire valley, lit by the silver light of the waning moon. Silvercrest slept in peace. For the first time in years, perhaps decades, there was no hunger. There was no fear. There was no tyranny. Soft footsteps sounded behind me. I didn't need to turn around to know who it was. "Can't sleep, Mama?" Elowen's mental voice was soft as a breeze. I held out my hand, and she took it, coming to nestle beside me. "Thinking too much," I admitted. "It still feels like a dream sometimes." Elowen rested her head on my arm. "It's not a dream. It's real. The spirits confirm it." I smiled. The spirits confirm many things. They like to confirm. It makes them feel important. A laugh escaped me. "My strange, wonderful girl." "Mama?" Her mental voice changed, becoming more serious. "Are you happy?" The question was simple. The answer was anything but. I thought of the woman I had been. That broken Vespera, kneeling on the throne room floor, clutching her chest as her bond was severed. That Vespera stumbling in the snow, begging for the death that seemed inevitable. And I thought of the woman I became. The warrior. The mother. The queen. The maid of a king who treated me as an equal. "Yes," I said finally. "I am happy." "Good." Elowen squeezed my hand. "You deserve it." We stood there, mother and daughter, watching the valley awaken. The first lights appeared in the houses. Smoke rose from the chimneys. Roosters crowed in the distance. And then, a different sound. Heavy footsteps in the corridor. The door opening. Zephyr rushing in, his hair messier than ever, followed by Oberon, who carried a breakfast tray. "Mother!" Zephyr jumped onto the bed. "Father said we can train with real swords today." "I said wooden swords," Oberon corrected, setting down the tray. "Real swords when you are 10. That's an eternity. 5 years pass quickly." "They do not." I watched the argument, my heart so full it ached. Elowen joined her brother in bed, and soon the two were squabbling over who got the biggest slice of bread. Oberon approached me, stopping by my side at the window, his arm wrapped around my waist, pulling me close. "Are you well?" he asked softly. I leaned my head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of the heart that belonged to me. "I am perfect." We stood there, watching our children, watching our kingdom, watching the new life we had built from the ashes of the old one. Later that day, I found myself at the highest point of the castle. It was an observation tower, forgotten for decades, which I had turned into my personal sanctuary. From there, I could see everything. The green valley stretching to the horizon on one side. The ancestors' glacier gleaming on the other, eternal and unchanging. Oberon was by my side, as always. Zephyr ran along the parapet with the inexhaustible energy of a 5-year-old child. Elowen sat on a stone, talking to spirits only she could see. The wind blew my hair, carrying the scent of spring flowers mixed with the eternal cold of the mountain. 2 worlds, 2 lives, united as one. "Do you have regrets?" Oberon's voice was low, just for me. I considered the question. "I regret the time I wasted trying to be accepted by those who didn't deserve me," I said slowly. "I regret doubting myself for so long." I turned to face him. "But I do not regret the pain. I do not regret the snow. I do not regret anything that brought me to you." Oberon smiled. It was rare to see him smile completely, without reserve. When he did, it transformed his entire face. "I waited centuries for you," he said. "I would wait 1,000 more if I needed to." I stood on my tiptoes and kissed his cheek, right on the scar that ran across his blind eye. "You won't have to wait for anything else." Zephyr came running up, pulling the hem of my clothes. "Mother! Mother! Elowen said it's going to snow. Can it snow? Please." I looked at Elowen, who smiled serenely. "The snow wants to come," she said mentally. "It misses you." I held out my hand to the clear sky. The power came easily now, as natural as breathing. Clouds formed from nothing, and white flakes began to fall, dancing in the wind, covering the top of the tower. Zephyr screamed with joy, running to catch flakes in his mouth. Ilawan laughed, the sound rare and precious. Oberon pulled me closer, shielding us from the cold that could no longer harm me. And I, Vespera, the she-wolf who was cast out to die in the snow, looked upon my kingdom, my family, my life. They feared the winter once. They feared the cold, the darkness, the death it brought. Now they prayed that the Ice Queen would never leave again. And I had no intention of leaving. Never again. The wind howled around us, but it was a howl of welcome. The snow fell, but it was a blessing. And on the top of that tower, surrounded by everything I loved, I finally found what I had been searching for my whole life. It wasn't vengeance. It wasn't power. It wasn't even justice. It was peace. It was home. It was love. And that was more than enough. Thank you for being here and for joining me for another story. I truly hope you enjoyed it. If you want, leave your comment. I love reading what you feel and think after each episode. Thank you for the love, and see you in the next story.